right. It is recording. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for showing up. We're going to talk a little bit about our 2023 open source research experience activities coming up, and particularly focusing on what we're hoping for from a mentor perspective for the different aspects of the program. This year's a little different, and so it's kind of exciting. We have, and Carlos will talk a bit more about the Summer of Reproducibility, because that's our kind of big add-on this year that is expanding the OSRE further than what we've done previously, and is allowing us to work with not just UC-based mentors, UC-affiliated mentors, but also with basically any faculty mentor or researcher who is working with regards to reproducible artifacts. And I'll let Carlos talk a bit more about that. So feel free to pop questions in the chat throughout the session between Carlos and I. Whoever's not talking should be able to answer. Also, feel free to, if something's really confusing, go ahead and just raise a hand and say, hey, I don't understand what's going on. We do have two previous mentors on the call, and I didn't ask them to prepare anything, but I may ask them questions. So be prepared, Oscar and Aaron, for me to go, hey, how does that work? How did that work for you? Or how did that not work for you? And just to say the two of them, I don't think there are any other ones on the call. I can't see the whole list because of where my screen is, but those two, both of them are most popular. Two of our very popular, at least from volume of applications and volume of students. So they have a lot of great experience to share. All right, so I'm going to move on. And Carlos, do you want to? Oops, is that working? Sure. There we go. Carlos, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, most people here on the call know me. I'm an adjunct professor at UC Santa Cruz, founder and director of the Open Source Program Office at UC Santa Cruz, and also the founder and director of the Center for Research in Open Source Software, and the co-founder and director of the UC Systems Research Lab. Before I joined UC Santa Cruz, I was a performance engineer at NetApp, currently advising 5 PhD students and graduated 9 PhD students and 12 master students. And my area is programmable storage systems, data management and storage, and also networking layer, and more recently, practical reproducibility. And that's it. Stephanie?
This is me. I think at least a good number of you already know me, but just a quick recap then. I am the executive director for Center for Research in Open Source Software, and also working with Carlos on the Open Source Program Office, which we started at the beginning of this year. I typically work on a lot of the community related and mentor related activities here at CROSS and at the OSPO. My previous life was completely different, working on non-proliferation issues up until I joined CROSS in 2016. But even there, I worked a lot on looking at how open source technologies benefited like research that I was working on in the social sciences, and also looking at, a lot of the community building and capacity building that I worked on there has also been really helpful for me as I moved into CROSS. So that's me. And I'm generally the administrative lead on all of these mentorship programs that we're going to talk about. Although you can always reach out to either Carlos or I or our general OSPO info group email, feel free to just reach out straight to me too if you have any questions answered. All right, and Carlos, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stephanie. So this is just a little bit of background about the Open Source Program Office at UC Santa Cruz. This grew out of the Center for Research in Open Source Software, which was there to gap the gap, or there's a gap between student work and open source projects. And then we found that the research center organization form is not fits not as well as a sort of more programmatic office that is campus wide, and that brought us to creating the open source program office, and we're very happy that Alfred P. Sloan Foundation is funding this for 2 years to build this and to establish it at UC Santa Cruz, and also to create programs that are not only campus-wide, but actually UC-wide. And the key idea is to amplify research impact via open source strategies and techniques. Next slide. The more recent addition to this is there's been always, in my mind, sort of a very strong connection between open source in academia and reproducibility in academia, and especially in computational sciences. And so we're very happy to recently got funded by the NSF FAIRS research collaborative network, I think it's called, and RCN. And so the project Wrapup is a collaboration with Kate Keehee and Har Gnawi at University of Chicago, us at UC Santa Cruz, and Frida Fund at NYU Tandon. And so, and it is essentially establishing a exchange of reproducibility artifacts. And so the idea is that this exchange will accelerate the discovery and design of tools that simplify reproducibility in computational research. And so your observation was that a lot of conferences are starting to encourage reproducibility and the creation of reproducibility artifacts, but there's not really a market or a the other side of actually using these reproducibility artifacts, right? And so our idea is to, next slide, to accelerate this this creation of such an exchange by the Summer of Reproducibility. Very similar to the idea of Google Summer of Code, where Google realized that you could, really spread the idea of open source by summer student programs worldwide. And we have a program as part of the OSPO called the Open Source Research Experience that we have been running for a number of years, which leverages heavily Google Summer of Code, but also adds other sponsors and other outreach efforts into the mix. And it's the same idea, we're matching mentors with summer students. And the Summer of Reproducibility is such a thing where it's very similar, right? It's just that the topics are different. Here at the Open Source Research Experience, the mentor organization is defined of having, for each project idea, at least one UC affiliated mentor or affiliated with a national lab that is associated with the University of California. So that's Lawrence Livermore, Lawrence Berkeley, and Los Alamos. In the Summer of Reproducibility, we don't have that limitation, right? Everybody can participate, but there the defining feature is that it has to be something to do with reproducibility. So because we're using a lot of the same organizational patterns as Summer of Reproducibility, in fact, we're very aligned to it because we're also every year applying for it, for mentorship status with Summer of Reproducibility. Sorry, the GSOC, the Google Summer of Code. There's too many summers in the word. There's this exchange is really scalable, right? That is the genius of the Google Summer of Code design. And the scalability comes from mentors and students basically creating a central website, right, for each mentor organization, and then really pushing and promoting that website, but then students can directly contact mentors. There's nothing that goes through some kind of central part. So everybody in distributed systems knows this, right? You want to basically have peer-to-peer communication. And so it's a very distributed effort where we help mentors find students, but it doesn't go through us, right? We have a system of deadlines that define certain deliverables, with the effect that mentors have the opportunity to select the best students they find and work with them over the summer. And so far, this model really works, and the mentors are pretty happy about it. And the students are as well. So because there is a natural match, it's not like other research experience programs where you basically just force mentors and students together for a summer. I've participated in those programs and I have found them less satisfactory. Next slide. So the goal really is to connect stakeholders. We have, again, not only Google Summer of Code, but also other sponsors like the Linux Foundation and some industry sponsors that participate in this. We are trying to find as many scientists as possible to really engage with this process. And the more we have, the more sponsors, the more scientists, and the more students we have, the greater this whole thing works, right? You have, and so we have from the year before last year to last year, so 2022, it's almost last year, we had a tremendous growth because we just broadened the scope of the project and who can participate, and we expect the same thing to happen the coming year as well. Next slide. All right, Stephanie.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Carlos said, our real limitation on the number of slots, and this is a question I get a lot of times, typically it's the number of mentors we have. So the more mentors we have, the more slots more students we can support. Because generally speaking, especially with now the add-on of the Summer Reproducibility, which has funding directly attached to it, there'll definitely be a good number of slots available, assuming that we get the mentors. So that's why we're reaching out here and elsewhere. So just a quick background, Carlos talked about this a little bit already, but the Google Summer of Code is kind of where a lot of this all started. It's been around since 2004. It's open to mentors and students from everywhere in the world, and basically Google's open source office pays students to work on open source projects for a summer, for the 3 months. And so it's fully funded by Google, and we've been working with them since 2018. It's a fully remote project as well, so that's why it's got such a great global reach. That of course has its challenges as well, as a lot of our mentors can attest, trying to deal with working with students in India over the summer with time changes and that type of thing. But it does give a lot of flexibility and an ability to work with talent from all over the world. So the key actors that we talk about typically when we're dealing with GSOC and any of the projects or any of the programs that we have created kind of based on the GSOC model is the mentor organization. That's typically us. And this year we're going to definitely try to be what's considered an umbrella organization that allows for even more mentors and even more different diversity in the projects that we're sponsoring. And so I say org admins a lot. That's me and Carlos. So we're the ones from GSOC perspective that are kind of the main focal point of administrative work for these programs, or for when GSOC interacts with anyone, it's going to interact more directly with the org admin. The mentors, and again, these are academic researchers and project maintainers working on open source projects, and I guess we're going to have a little bit variation on that because of the Summer Reproducibility But this is kind of the typical GSOC model. And they're the ones who create the project ideas that mentors work with. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, of course, we have students. And nowadays, they're calling contributors not just students, because they've tried to be more flexible in the folks that are allowed to be contributors in GSOC. And the focus has always been from a GSOC perspective about bringing in new people, new folks who have not worked much in open source. So, this is kind of, when we're talking to students, we often point out the fact that it's like, just because you don't know anything about open source or don't think you know about anything about open source, well, in actuality, if that's how you feel, you're probably the perfect student for this activity. I was just checking Rob Ritchie's question. If you have ideas for more than one project, can I, and would that be a good idea to mentor more than one? Oh, we'll talk about that. Oh yeah, and there you go, Oscar jumping on that one. So I'll keep moving, and then we'll, I'm sure that general discussion will come up.
Great, thank you, thanks.
No problem. I was like, oh, I know a couple mentors will probably have some feedback on that. Sorry. And then so after a few years of working with GSOC, we recognized that, this was a great way of, bringing in more students into our own projects. And so aside from being just having GSOC be how we fund these summer programs, we started thinking like, hey, we can expand the sponsor model for this, or expand the type of sponsors we can get. And so instead of just being GSOC, cross working with GSOC, we created the open source research experience in 2020. And we make it work in parallel now. First year we didn't, and it was a little confusing. So we decided working in parallel, i.e. meaning we use GSOC platforms, we use GSOC schedules, and keeping that kind of them linked has been very helpful. And similar to what we talked about earlier, it aims at jumpstarting developer communities. It works with, in the typical OSRE, kind of, I call it traditional, in that sign up, the registration that y'all all filled out. The traditional model is working with affiliated mentors, but students can be from anywhere in the world. The Summer of Reproducibility changes that, who's able to be a mentor a little bit for us this year. And it really does give a great opportunity for students to gain really useful professional experience. And so this is just a quick overview of what we did this last year. This was, again, Carlos mentioned, this was our largest group by far. It was, I think, 12 students was successfully. We had a few students, as we expanded, we discovered a few that as you scale, things can get complicated. And so that's some of the issues that we are trying to recognize and make some changes in 2023 to deal with those scaling issues. So because we originally had, I think we had three or four that weren't successful in the end, but still a pretty good success rate, I think. And these students came from all over the world. And we had mentors from 4 different campuses and labs represented. And we had student feedback was great. Even some of the students who weren't successful gave great feedback. It was kind of like my mentors were there. My mentors were always there. The mentors on call right now were 2 of the ones that everyone just said were amazing. I hope that you've had a chance to read your student feedback, because it was always really good. And again, we had a huge array of topics. And then these are the folks who are our sponsors. Aside from Google Code, we had Toshiba gave a sponsorship. Cross was sponsoring, as well as Baskin School of Engineering, Inclusive Excellence Hub and Citrus. So we had students kind of who had slots that were sponsored specifically from those other organizations as well. There's a full report on those. There's the blog post from September there. So I'm not necessarily if there are I see the chat has a few things. I can't really see what's being said, so I'm hoping that it's all being covered. I think, Carlos, did you want to talk a little bit about any more?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
I like to, Frida sent like 3 questions, and I maybe let me just quickly go over that before we go into the Summer of Reproducibility detail. Yeah, so the question 1 is, Frida, maybe you can just speak up, because we can just do it interactively. I don't read like small.
Hi. So my first question was about the Summer of Reproducibility. It's not clear to me, is a project just automatically considered open source if a student is going to then open source the outcome, or does it have to be connected to an existing kind of ongoing open source project?
It's the first one, right? So it doesn't have to be connected to an existing project. And it doesn't even have to be open source at the point when you actually work on it. There needs to be just the assurance that at the end of summer it will be open sourced. So if there, for whatever reason, because of publication issues or something, you don't want to disclose it just yet, right? That's fine. We just want to make sure that eventually that work becomes open source.
Okay, cool. My second question was about the project description. So sometimes we kind of, tailor the very specific details of the project to the specific student's interest. So I'm wondering how specific we need to be in that description. For example, do I have to describe the exact paper a student is going to be expected to kind of reproduce the work of, or can I just have a kind of topic area that's of interest, and then the specifics will depend on the student? How specific do I have to be?
That's absolutely up to you, right? So we actually do very, in the past, we have done very little. Frankly, the only thing that we intervened sometimes was when people had either a lot of project ideas and they're posting that, and we didn't see enough mentors, or the mentor contacts were not enough, or they miss some of the must-have informations. And so it's really that, but the description we keep, we don't want to get too involved in that, because we want to scale, right? And so if we edit every project or looked at every project description, it won't scale. And so it's up to you and what you think will attract the students that you want to work with.
Okay. My third question was about, those of us who have other like summer research programs we're involved in. I wanted to know if it's okay to kind of integrate the students participating in this program with us as mentors with those other efforts. Like, for example, if I have a weekly meeting with all my summer research students, can I bring in my summer of code student on Zoom? Or is it more of an expectation that, they're kind of working a little more hands-off, and I'm not supposed to expect them to attend meetings?
No, you can totally integrate. In fact, that's what we expect, that you integrate it, right? So we want actually the students, so we want this to be primarily something where you recruit students, essentially. That's one of the really big benefits of these programs in the past, that you find good students, that those students become familiar with your research environment. And yeah, in fact, that would be fantastic if you could integrate them as much as possible into your research.
Right.
Okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, for sure. Oh, sorry.
I have a question about Stephanie's comments that she just posted. So I see there's an expectation of, let's say, 2 mentors per project, a lead mentor and a co-mentor. So can there be like a faculty lead mentor, and the other co-mentor can be a more experienced student? How does that usually work?
The idea of it, and I think the Oscar and Aaron can definitely attest to, is it just having a backup person for the lead mentor, just to have somebody who says, okay, who I preferably is someone who's integrated into the project, the overall project, but it kind of depends. It really depends on what works best for the mentor team and the lead mentor. So we're pretty flexible as long as we feel like there isn't just the main concern is to make sure that mentor isn't overloaded. That's my primary concern, and then my secondary concern is at the end, and close to this first, but still, I think secondary is that the student gets timely responses. So that's kind of where the thought process on that.
I'd like to follow up on that and ask whether it's okay if I am still figuring out, like do I have to know, is it all right to decide later who the secondary mentor would be? Okay, because like, for example, the one of the projects that I'm thinking about, I have several existing students who would be good secondary mentors, but I'm not sure at this point which ones are going to go do internships and stuff over the summer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would do, and generally I would probably list one for on there.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
That person can change. And it really is, even during the program, I've shifted mentors around. I mean, and so it just kind of, things happen. So you're totally understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Brady, do you have another question?
That was my question too. So
Okay.
I'll second.
Awesome. Yeah.
All
So
right.
yeah, there's a lot of flexibility built into the system for those exact issues. So Carlos, did you have more on this slide? I can't remember where we were.
Yeah, let me take over really quickly, because I think this is a good point to just talk about the website and how you can contribute projects. So let me see whether I can just go. Yeah. So there's basically two entries into the open source research experience. One is the Summer of Reproducibility, which is this website here. Can everybody see this? And so SOR, or it's basically OSRE, right? That's the more general one. The SOR is basically very quickly direct you to this one, right? And then we have essentially sort of an overview of the program. There is a part that's specifically for students. Towards the end of the program of the year, we will have a number of blog posting here from the participants, summer contributors. Then this is the most important part for you right now. There's essentially, general information about who can participate. So either you're affiliated with the University of California or one of the associate DOE national labs, or your project has a connection to producing or using reproducibility artifacts. And eventually, this is, again, stressing, that eventually this all these projects has to be basically software created in these projects have to be available, licensed on an open source software license. And then there's like these more mechanical instructions on how to actually contribute a project, right? And so before I show how that's actually done, you can just scroll down, or you can just go up here and click view projects. Right now we have only the projects listed from last year, but it will be something similar. So essentially the projects that get displayed here is basically just a tag. All projects that have the OSRE 22 tag are right now displayed here, but then for the next year, obviously the projects that have the OSRE 23 tag will be here displayed. And then they have like two subgroups. One is the UC mentor projects and one of the reproducibility projects, right? So last year we had one reproducibility project, but there was also a UC mentor project. So they're basically, you can have projects that have both tags, UC and Summer of Reproducibility. So each of those project pages is essentially a description of the project, and some of people are pretty detailed, right? And then you have a list of ideas, and that's basically this sort of, I think it's 3 hashtags heading that basically describe, I don't know what heading actually, it doesn't matter, but describe essentially different projects. So project ideas. So here's, for instance, a project by Oscar, who's also in the audience, and it has like a bunch of project ideas, right? You can see sort of the different project ideas. There are quite a few of them, and then each project ideas has these particular parts, like topics, skills, difficulties, size, and the mentors, right? And so we, in the past, people put like a mail to a link in here, right? So this generates a mail window. But this time, we also offer people to essentially create mentor entries in this website. And so going back to these instructions, there are basically two parts, right? One is how to create a project. And there are two ways of doing this. Either you just send us the information, right? That basically goes to ospo-info-group at ucsc.edu, or you actually do it yourself. And that's of course vastly preferred by us because it's less work for us. You fork a Git repository, and then you create or copy it from the previous year if you've already participated in the previous years. Your project or multiple projects, right? And they're organized in such a way where you go into this directory and you find like two subdirectories. Right now, there's OSRE 22 and OSRE 23. And then you just add your organization, right? So whether it's the University of Utah or UC Santa Barbara or something, and you can see that in OSRE 22, those organizations that participated last year, and then some project name. That can be just a unique project name, just make something up. And then, and that's basically, those are directories. And then in that directory, you create a markdown file that's called index. And then you can add a picture. And that picture will show up on the website. It's kind of nice, gives you sort of character, and then some information about how to fill out the front matter, date, the authors. And so here again, the authors and the mentors, they're basically, this is where the second part of the instructions come in. You can add yourself to this website as a mentor. And these are the instructions. It's very similar to the kind of, you can, again, just email us and we add you, or you can make that part of when you file a project. You can also add mentors using essentially these instructions where you create files, directories and files, come up with a unique username. And then the important part is that you either say whether you're a University of California mentor or a Summer of Reproducibility mentor, or both, right? And so, and the same thing here is, if you create a project, you either use the OSRE 23 tag and UC or reproducibility, right? So this is basically, this will list you under the Summer of Reproducibility projects, and this will list you under the UC mentor project. So that's it. There's some little syntactic details I won't go into, but people who are familiar with Git and Git repositories, let me know if there's anything unclear in these instructions. You can also just click this link. And then if I logged in on GitHub, then you would actually see the repository. Anyway, so this gets you directly to the file that actually defines this web page. So, and then you can, issue a pull request if you want to have something changed. Any questions on that?
asked a question in chat. I'm wondering if we post a reasonable project, what should our expectations be about, the probability of actually getting the student?
So it's actually pretty high. I think, I don't know, Stephanie, what are those statistics?
I never done a straight one. I've never done a straight one. Really, each project has there's peaks for certain projects and other ones that don't get as much attention. But I think generally speaking, if you have for each mentor that we had last year, I'm going to say this, I'm thinking it as I'm saying it, but I feel like for each mentor group we had last year, we had at least one student, possibly two if you had more than one mentor. And they had applications. They would normally have multiple applications. So it wasn't just, oh, I only have one student to pick from. And there were a number of projects that were both, like I said, Aaron and Oscar can attest to, where they had multiples, significant multiples, i.e. 10 to 15 to 20. Yeah, I don't remember how many Aaron had, but it was a lot. And to work with. So it kind of, for reproducibility, and this is a little bit of an unknown, I feel like, because we haven't had as much of a experience with it. But I think generally speaking, for the open source projects, we definitely have not had to tell a mentor, oh, sorry, you didn't get a slot.
Cool, thanks.
So that's basically, we had about 15 summer students, right? But
yeah.
Anyway, so and we had about 15 projects.
Yeah.
Right. So that's it. So what Stephanie said, basically, we at average we get one summer student, and those are funded summer students,
yeah.
Right? One per project.
And
on average.
I can actually let's see, where's that slide? So part of the issue that's really nice for the way we do it through the GSOC program is that instead of asking for a number of slots, and I was going to go through this in the application section, but I think it talks a little bit to your question, is we rank them based on how much we like. It's how much the mentor likes the projects. And so the org admins are responsible for ranking the overall for all of the projects. So basically what we've done is that each mentor group, so everybody will rank the ones they've seen. And so everybody's first picks go up first. And then the assumption is all of those, in which we had last year, everybody's first pick got picked. And we had a pretty good number of first picks. And then the second, their second picks, maybe we got through to towards the end, we got a lot of second picks as well. So meaning we had, two mentors, you can work as co-mentors on first two students, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. So we do have from last year's experience and from previous years as well, but we had more volume last year. So it's a better kind of bigger data set to work with. We definitely got first and second picks for a lot of our mentors, and for some we had even more. So I hope that and again, and a lot of the limiting factors that we have is if I feel like you are, I don't want to be too maternal about this, but I feel like if you're putting too much on yourself, I may go, hey, you only have two mentors. I really don't think that having 3 students is a great idea. And Aaron's probably giving dagger eyes because I asked him to do 3 students last year for a different reason, but and we're not doing that again. But generally speaking, I'm nicer to my mentors, and I will say, I don't think you should have more students than mentors for one thing. And then, so like I said, you should have a mentor, 2 mentors per project, but you can have one mentor can be a lead mentor on one project and a co-mentor on the other one, and vice versa. So there's ways of working it out that you don't need necessarily have 4 mentors for 2 students. You just need to make sure you have one, you have it worked out that that your workload's going to be sustainable for the entire summer. if that helps.
If I can add to that, Stephanie, that model that you just presented is one that I used 2 summers ago, where I had one project where I was lead mentor and co-mentor on the other one, and then I had another mentor who was lead mentor and I co-mentored for that project. And that division of labor worked quite well. But I would avoid trying to be lead mentor on more than one project.
Great. Jonathan, did you have?
Yeah, so, sorry, my audio has been in and out, so I may have missed a couple of details here. If we're not around physically in some way, this is just going to be remote. Am I right in understanding that?
Yeah,
Based off
typically,
of the amounts as well, because I'm just thinking about like students trying to rent.
No, we do there. I mean, if there could be a situation where you happen to have a student who is local, but and even when we had a UCSC student it was during COVID, and that UCSC student was in China at the time of the program. So like we have never had, I don't think we've ever had an in-person. And this is what's interesting is when we brought on Aaron's project, which is a hardware-based project, we were like, how the hell is this going to work? Excuse my language, but it was like, how is this going to work? And it does. Aaron can attest to it. He figured it out. He's been doing this. That was your second year, Aaron, right? You've done this for a couple of years, and we've had other. Yeah. So yeah.
I've done GSOC projects for a few years.
Oh,
so
right.
but
it was a nice.
I've seen it work well, regardless of it being remote in a lot of cases. I guess the other question was more kind of administratively from the university side. If the students are not doing it through GSOC but are being paid, what is the mechanism for that? Like, are they paid as a fellowship?
Yeah, we typically there's a couple ways we do a fellowship, and I've got some stuff worked out. We will do it through UCSC, and we were doing it as an independent contractor, but we discovered that for undergraduate students we could actually do fellowships in a way that they get paid. It's not nowhere near as complicated, and it's just considered because it's as long as they're, I mean, typically as long as they're undergraduates, we can do this kind of fellowship setup where they get a stipend, and we can, which is very similar to this way that the GSOC folks get paid, which is in like monthly stipends. So
we have to be very careful with students. UC Santa Cruz or UC students, right, who just graduated and are not actually formally students anymore when the summer project starts.
Yeah,
that turned out to be a huge headache.
No, it's a good point. I mean, we have to, those are things but it's now that once we've had one experience where we're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't have done it that way. Greta, you had another question?
Yeah, just back to the issue of like number of mentors and number of students. So I usually run the summers as, I guess, kind of like a pyramid scheme where I have, a whole team of summer research students, but there are the high school students, and then there are the undergrads who have a little more experience, and the expectation that they help the high school students a little bit too.
Oh, that's great.
And then you have a handful of master's students who can also help the undergrads, and you have 1 or 2 PhD students, and then a faculty mentor, at the top of it all. So no one is exactly like, mentor only or student only, but there's a lot of mentorship going on. Is that kind of structure okay?
I think that sounds like a great structure. I don't think we've seen it. Am I thinking about it like in any of our projects? But that doesn't mean that I don't think it's something that we could totally bring on. And
in the end, it's really only right. So we have to follow a certain structure to become mentor organization for Google Summer of Code. And so at some point, it doesn't really matter how you organize your project or program, but it needs to look in a way that is attractive to, or clearly we want to be a mentor organization at Google Summer of Code, right? And so the way they look at this is they have certain recommendations of what mentor structures they want to see, and they want to basically have, I think, 2 or 3 mentors.
Yeah, they want 2 mentors per student.
Yeah. And so that's basically what we need to show, right? That each project has like 2 mentors, and then you can, if you have questions of what would look the right, what would we can just work that out.
Yeah.
Basically, but what you actually do in the summer, as long as it's successful, and it sounds like you've been doing this for a while, is really up to you.
Thanks.
I was gonna say, even with what's on the ideas page, if you just, we also have been fine with having just one mentor listed there in our application process for to be an org admin. It really gets to the when we start assigning slots that Google starts to look at, you know, oh, do you have two people assigned to that person? And that's kind of, but that can be flexible. Like I said, I have changed mentors. So if you like have a graduate student, you know, that, or even an undergrad that you think is really strong, you know, they're not looking at the CV for the mentors. They're actually just feeling that, do you have a physical person that you could, whose email you have, who's okay, who's accepted themselves that role as a mentor. And then, so they're just, you know, they have so many students, they don't go in, you know, in granularly and look at who's mentoring. So if you feel comfortable with a person, listing a person, anyone within your team, that's fine. I mean, that will be fine. So, but we've got about 10 minutes left. And I wanted to go quickly over just the timeline, because make sure everybody knows what's going on. But feel free to keep giving me, you know, sitting questions. These are great questions. And so this is what the students have to do. Just a quick overview of what the students have to do. It really starts the beginning, next month sometime. But especially after the org admin applications are completed, and we knock wood, our GSOC org admins again, or GSOC mentor organization again this year, this coming 2023. And students will reach out. The idea is that students are going to reach out to you ahead of time based on some feedback from some of our mentors. We may try and structure that a little bit more than we have, which has been a kind of free-for-all in previous years. But just to make it a little easier, especially for projects that get a huge amount of applications, to be able to help the mentors filter a little bit better. And then so the students may reach out to you, you go back and forth with the student about the application, about their application. We provide a template for that application. I'm guessing that the Summer of Reproducibility template is going to change a bit, and I still have to look at that a little bit, or one or have a template that's a little more flexible and allows for some variation for that. But and again, the template it's just, these are really important things to have in your application so that we can judge things apples to apples, but they're, each project and can vary that as they need it. So it's not set in stone. Again, so I think that's it for the students do, and we can talk a little bit more of that if it's a question, but the timeline, so generally it's winter is the big push, and March to early April, students start working with the mentors to complete the proposal. April 4th is their deadline, and that'll be the student application deadline. And assuming that we are a GSOC mentor organization, we will use the GSOC portal for that, and we'll use it for all of the applications. Like I said, it just makes it less confusing to everyone if everything goes through that same portal instead of having multiple portals. And we are the ones who manage our portal. So it's actually relatively user-friendly setup from the applicant side. It's not so great for org admins, but it's easy for students to follow. We review them. We get ratings from the mentors, then we get ratings, and then we do another set of ratings based on all of the ratings that the mentors give us. And then we tell the GSOC and then also, or whatever sponsors else we have, which students we want. And they tell us how many we got. From GSOC, they tell us you have 17, or you have 18, or whatever student slots. and we're going to give them from your one, whatever, however you rank them, those are your slots. So the
Stephanie,
individuals, yeah.
let me quickly there. So for the Summer of Reproducibility, we will definitely, work with the Repertoire PIs, right? Frida, you and Kate and Har, and reviewing the projects that we got, right? And then decide which how we want to allocate the repertoire funds, or we also obviously we want to maximize funding from Summer of Code, Google Summer of Code, but we want to also select projects that make sense for the mission of the repertoire project, obviously.
Right. So yeah, sorry I haven't really integrated that in, but yes, that's for sure. All right. So, and then the June-August timeframe is when the projects happen, and September, normally everything's wraps up. And then we try and show off their work, the students' work during the September-October period. I think we've hit most of this. One thing I want to point out is that the idea is that mentors are only really supposed to spend 3 to 5 hours per week for a student on the traditional set. I think the Summer Reproducibility is going to have maybe a different feel on that, but the idea that the general idea is that the student's work is supposed to be beneficial to the mentor as well as the student. That both their success, the success of both of those stakeholders is the major goal of the project, or major goal of the program. A little quick last couple minutes, and I think we are. We've kind of discussed this a little bit. The first one is that we are doing a big push again this year to historically excluded groups, and HBCUs and minority serving institutions are on our list of outreach. And we're trying to make the application projects more accessible to folks from those groups, as well as other excluded groups. We are pushing, we will talk about this more, but maybe at a later date, but if you do choose to mentor, we are ramping up our mentor support process, which we noticed, like I said, the scaling up last year made us see a few things that probably needed a little bit more of our time and attention, and especially creating more of an opportunity for mentors to get together and talk and share experiences, and to discuss how to identify red flags when you're like, oh, maybe this student isn't aiming toward or isn't likely to be successful, and how to see that in a way that still supports the student, and expectations as well, professional expectations for students, making sure students just don't kind of disappear on you. And we have a little bit more, I could talk a little bit more about this sponsorship model that we're using, which is similar last year, but we're trying to allow more variation on how much people give, that if people, if sponsors will have different varying sponsorship levels. And there'll be more about that up on the website soon. So we've had a lot of great questions, and we've had a couple comments from previous mentors, so thank you. I want to say that because this is a lot of information, I'm going to do extra sessions on this, and I'm going to probably try and split them a little bit, whereas one is really specific to Summer Reproducibility, and the other one is more specific to our traditional UC-based one, and that way, because some of the questions are different, even though we're trying to keep them in parallel. And I'll probably try and schedule it that they piggyback, they're right next to each other. So if somebody wants to just sit through an hour and a half versus 45 minutes, they can. And that'll be probably early part of January. So this is kind of the first general talk, but we'll have more specific ones coming up in January if you have more questions. But feel free to try and, I can stay on for a little bit longer if people have more questions, or people can obviously send me questions as well. And I don't, anyone else?
I have a quick, we haven't posted that for some reason, but the deadline for us to, apply for GSOC mentorship or mentor organization status is February 7th. So by then, we really need to have a good portfolio of projects on the website.
Right.
And so even though you can also, add projects afterwards, it's really the projects that we have before February 7th that might make a difference whether we get accepted to Google Summer of Code or not.
Right. Good point. Very good point. Right. Right. I know Carlos says you have to drop off to our next meeting, but I can stick on if there's any more last minute questions from anyone. We lost a few people already, so I'm guessing not.
Yeah, thanks. I do have some other questions, but I'll send them as follow-ups because I need to drop off too. So
Okay,
but
great.
thank you very much. I
No problem.
appreciate it.
Thanks to everyone. And
Thank you.
have a good holiday for those I won't see before then.
So yeah.
Bye-bye.